Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Friedberg. I'm the CEO of Flux B2B and fantastic to be here today. Thank you all very much for joining the Different by Design, How Diverse Thinkers Unlock Open Innovation, an incredible panel put on by Unlock Innovation and supported by Flux B2B, and a fantastic way to end Dyslexia Awareness Month. Bookend by this incredible panel that are going to share some incredible insights with you today. But before we start, I'm just going to pass to the wonderful Dorinda Britton to be able to share a couple of lovely opening words. Thank you, Dorinda.
Good day. My name is Dorinda Britton. I'm a co-founder of Unlock Innovation Limited. Unlock Innovation is fighting the good fight, I guess you would say, for including neurodiversity, in particular dyslexia, in teams. We believe that today's challenges need different thinking, and they need the clash of neurotypical people and neurodivergent people in order to test ideas, come up with ideas, test ideas, and move us forward.
That's brilliant. And move us forward. We will. Super excited to have you here today. Now, unfortunately, Dorinda couldn't be with us, obviously, but was fantastic to be able to hear from her. So today, this panel is very special, very close to my heart, but this isn't just about being more innovative. This is about using the minds that you already have in a way that maybe you haven't thought of. In case you didn't know, 1 in 5 of us think differently and are dyslexic. And that difference is often invisible. It's often underused, and just maybe it's the unlock you need to drive some innovation inside your company, which is exactly the purpose of Unlock Innovation. So over the next 30, 40 minutes, we're going to share, well, the panel is going to share some incredible stories, some things and ways that you can, as a manager, can try out next week, today, actually. And if you are neurodivergent and listening, you're going to hear from 4 amazing leaders about how they have used their diversity as an advantage. And I just want to be, kind of set the scene here. This is not about adding on. This is about, adding on. It's not about replacing as a way to untap all the potential in each of your organizations and each of your teams. So we're going to kick off. Now, we want to encourage questions. So if you look at your Teams console, you'll see there's a Q&A and a chat. We're going to use the Q&A, okay? That's how you can ask questions. Please ask as we go through between Chris and myself. We will be kind of managing that. Well, we're going to do a little test now. Go and open the Q&A panel, and Hannah is putting in a question in there. She wants to understand what company you're from and what role. Let's just have a look at who we have there. That should be coming in. There we go. If you've got, go to the Q&A panel just so that we can get you used to answering questions. And all you need to do is just comment on that. And I'm going to go. Okay, we don't have some coming up. That was me. Okay, I'm going to keep going. There we go. Okay, please ask questions as we go through. Now, this is, honestly, we've got 4 amazing people. I want to introduce you to the panelists. First off, we've got Chris Cole. She is the co-founder of Unlock Innovation, and she's our translator today. She takes the big, messy ideas and turns them into plain language and simple systems that teams can run right now. She's the bridge often between both the vision and the execution, but making sure that different thinkers don't just contribute, they connect. And next we have Paul Reed. Hello, Paul. Pattern spotter, maths brain, and people first leader. He's a former tech entrepreneur turned fisheries officer. Paul sees patterns others miss in data, tone, and teams. Numbers come naturally to him with an honours in maths. English, not so much. And these days he moves effortlessly between the boardroom and the beach, championing psychological safety so people don't feel dumb. They just just different. Then we have Michelle Sharp, or Little Miss Blackberry, and the champion of the squiggly boxes. Diagnosed early, Michelle leads with radical honesty about what she's great at and what she's not. She also once helped bring BlackBerry, if you remember those old enough, one of the first smartphones to the UK. And she wore that nickname very proudly, not surprised. And today she builds cultures where people colour outside their job description boxes to create value. We're also really lucky to have Dave Veronese. He's a values-led builder of safe, high-performing teams, a joiner by trade, and a values-driven tech leader by practice. Dave believes culture is in the engine of innovation, and he invests in learning, celebrates individuals, and makes it safe to bring your whole self to work. And certainly, last but not least, we've got Aaron J, big picture builder, confidence collector. Aaron's a visual problem solver who can see the building finished before the first beam goes up. He started in survival mode and turned it into a leadership philosophy. Confidence plus trust equals clear honesty, which beats comfort every time. All right. Fantastic, guys. We're all ready to go. Now we're going to kick off with the first set of questions. So one of the things, and we obviously all met, we met before the panel just to be able to get a bit of a feel for everyone's background. And we talked a lot about, when we talk about difference, we don't mean deficit. What we mean is an advantage that often is untapped by how we work, because maybe too much text, too little whiteboard, too much sane thinking in the room. So what we want to do today is surface or talk a little bit about how do we surface where hidden capacity is. So Paul, I'm going to get you to lead off. Where have you seen hidden capacity in a team where you knew that there was talent there, but it just, wasn't being used?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Big question to open with, that's for sure. Firstly, everyone has untapped, potential, hidden talent, dyslexic or not dyslexic. And dyslexic thinkers just may find it a little bit more difficult to contribute fully because of rigid organizational frameworks or hierarchy kind of systems that are put in place. From my observations, really good places to start and to identify, where this hidden talent is. Places like quiet managers and frontline specialists who absolutely understand the operations of your business end to end. They are the experts. But then in open forums, they just don't volunteer and they don't step forward. You also kind of look for people who speak really vividly in small groups or one-on-ones, but under-deliver in bigger groups or in long-form kind of writing. I also like to look for people who use adaptive workarounds, whether it's voice notes, sketches, repeated kind of short summaries is a good thing. But the big one is I try and listen for people who are using pattern language. And by that I mean they're telling consistent stories, using storytelling to communicate ideas and sort of use what you kind of call surface systematic connectors in conversation. That being the relational links formed through these patterns. So how do they verbalize, align, respond, or diverge using pattern language? And once you identify that, then it's about creating the environment that they can really freely express themselves and their thinking.
And when you did that and you've done that, what changed? How did things change?
So, most applications, when you think about this in a work context, come around change management programs. So, you're implementing, new technology or new processes, and you're trying to, engage in a total workforce sense, from all levels in the organization. So how do you bring all of those people together in an environment where they can learn and contribute? And I've seen that in places like Air New Zealand and in the Met Service and New Zealand Post, and through, creating those environments. And if I started getting to the examples, sorry, Michael, would be here all day because, when you see the baggage handler and someone from line maintenance engineering and someone from passenger assist all collaborating to design a new check-in process that uses a kiosk, this quite a few years ago, it's just fantastic to see because they have all the knowledge.
That's a great example. Michelle, have you got, when we talked, you've actually had quite a bit of experience here as well. What can you add?
Yeah, I mean, Paul has probably told this far more articulately than I ever could, but I totally agree with everything that you've said, Paul, and thank you, Michael, for bringing me in here. My example, and like Paul, I could give a million examples and we could be here all day, is having started my life in a tech environment where not everybody's the same as each other. And again, this goes to the whole point of this conversation. It's not about dyslexia is better than anything else. It's about the fact that we should embrace all type of thinking, is by understanding that there was a certain type of group of people who had to have a different environment to excel in a work environment, and to create that environment and to make it acceptable for the rest of the organization in a tech environment. These were the really clever people that had to work in different hours and in different environments. You create a much better work environment for everybody.
Yeah.
Because you not only are you giving those people the ability to be the best of themselves, but you're creating an environment and a culture, which is my big thing, where everybody understands that we're not all the same.
Yeah.
And that's what should be embraced.
Yeah, I love that. If I'm, and look, looking at the people that are, and thank you all for saying who you are and where you're from, that's brilliant. So if I'm a manager listening to this, and kind of going, this is, I can see how this can work. What are some of the questions that you can ask this week to begin to uncover some of your team's invisible strengths? So Dave, I'm going to come to you just to sort of, what questions can we ask here?
Thanks, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. I think one question is one-to-one with people will be, when do you feel most in your zone? So we can listen for the conditions, not the output. So you might find someone thrives when they're connecting disparate ideas or spotting patterns or solving problems spatially rather than through written or spoken reports. So the key there is to listen how people think, not just what they say. And you can catch, understanding who visualize, who narrates, who needs to talk it through, who needs to sketch it out. And I think that's where we find the cognitive diversity, and we can start using those, identifying those styles and using them to their strengths.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think, you're coming from a tech company. Aaron, I'm going to ask you to jump in here as well. You're coming from a different industry. What are some of the questions you think a manager could ask today? Aaron, you're on mute.
Afternoon, everyone. Sorry about that. Thanks. I'm not sure. I'm trying to pay attention as much as I can here, and I'm trying to see, what these guys are offering. It's quite interesting. Around what questions you would ask, I don't know. Personally, I don't know what questions I would be asking. It's more about behaviours that I'm looking for, and how one another interact and how they complement each other with their mindsets and how they operate and function. So for me, I can't draw on a set of questions or anything like that, and maybe the others can add to that, which I suspect they can. But for me, I like watching people, how they operate and in different environments and different situations, and then how through being vulnerable, one another can accept the other person's advice and experience and guidance, and then through that's where you see their mindsets and what they offer come to the fore.
Look, and Michelle, that's you. Do you want to jump in? Love it.
Yeah, just wanted to add to what Aaron just said, if that's okay, really quickly, just to say that my biggest thing in the world is know what your strengths are, but also really understand your weaknesses. And I think if we can then all do that and make that a culture of how we behave as leaders, that is the best thing we can do, because I know what I'm good at. I'm also really, really aware of what I'm bad at. And I think that's kind of what you were saying, Aaron, is you look at the behaviors and what their strengths, and by knowing what you're not good at, and by being a leader who embraces that, you give the ability for the culture of the organization to also do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, and therefore the question is to people, what do you love doing? What are you really good at? And where you struggle, and begin to understand that allows anyone to be able to then match teams, but also capability. I love that. Just to come back to you, Aaron, you think you're talking about behaviors and things that you look for. When we talked, you had some great stories and examples of that, given that you have a very diverse workforce type. Got a story you can share for us?
Yeah, I mean, the one that sort of pops to mind is probably COVID. And COVID presented a pretty unique, scenario for, I think, all business leaders around the world at the same time, which was, a distant memory now. But what it allowed us to do was to play to our strengths. So for me, chaos creates an opportunity to play to my strengths. So for me, I was in my happy place for almost 3 years, because it felt like the world was turned upside down and there was lots of problems. And for me, and people like my brother were dyslexic thinkers, we want to create solutions and connect dots really quickly. We could move forward with confidence and address these situations that were presenting themselves. But the only way we could do that was having that complementary mindset and of trusted people around us that were picking up the other parts of what it required us to do on a day-to-day basis to deliver the job. We had everything from wage subsidies to multiple problems. We had one of the biggest bubbles in the country because of we housed 460 people on one property, and they had all these other things. We absolutely lent on all the different skills and personalities we had across the business, and everyone was able to step up and shine in that moment. And I think that's when it became apparent to us how complementary we are to one another as a team, and it allowed certain people to step up and play to their strengths. So for people like my brother and I, we were able to step up in confidence into that chaotic environment, which provided a level of calmness for other people that weren't so comfortable in that space, but allowed them to really excel where they were where we needed them to be strong. Because under pressure you revert to type often. And so by having a trusted team, it allowed everyone to really move confidently through their role to protect ultimately our people and our community. So for me, COVID was pretty awesome.
So that was a great test, which you and the company rose to. Yep, love it. Anyone else want to share a story? Paul or Dave, anything you want to add to that? Stories are great. They bring it to life.
Helps to take yourself off mute, doesn't it? Yeah, look, you can share 1,000 stories. There's one that I'd like to share with everyone. There may be people actually have dialed in who are part of this kind of approach. So if you think about an organisation like Air New Zealand, and you think about it this is way back in the time when they collapsed after Ansett, etc., and you're trying to rebuild a company, and you're operating in a framework where safety is paramount and there's strict processes and procedures in place, for obvious reasons. But you want to design a future, and you've got a whole bunch of new technology coming in, thinking about barcoded boarding, kiosks, and a whole different process. How do you do that? You don't do it by bringing together people and sitting in a room and PowerPoint presentations, and this is going to be the future because we've employed some consultants. They're going to tell us how to do it. So I'll describe a process where we brought in, it would have been 150, 200 people from across the organisation into a big warehouse from all walks of life and roles, and including external parties as well, union representation, union organisations. And there's no screen, there's no PowerPoint, there's no lectern, but there's an environment that's been set up with little areas and all these blank walls with props so that people can do scripts and sheets of paper. And what I'm talking about is a highly scripted environment over several days where people get to contribute by first being able to express their own thinking and their own ideas, and then sharing it with teams, and then sharing it with wider groups and audiences, and looping back and coming up with conclusions, and then a roll forward end of 3 days, you've got a design document and a blueprint for the future that 200 people have just created. And it doesn't matter if you're dyslexic or if you've got an English literature degree, you've all contributed, to that. And then you go back to your daily job and you're doing your job, but then 2 months later, you're all brought back together again. And what I witnessed was these hives of people, teams, just working away in a new way of working and contributing and sharing that they'd never done before. And that was just awesome to see. And I've seen that, and I've repeated this and seen it in multiple companies, and it's just great to see. And people unlocking their potential, and people feeling valued, and that they can contribute in a really good, safe way.
That's a great example, and I think it really talks to that. Everyone thinks, communicates very differently in different ways, and being able to have and bring all that together in a small or a big group is always going to create some tension, but tension's good, and that's where some the potential and innovation comes from. It's great. Okay, we're going to it's great. I think there's some good stories there. And again, there's lots of stories from the panel. So if anyone's got any specific questions, feel free to drop them in. We're just going to change tact a little bit now, and just, all of the panelists are leaders. And so what does leadership mean in this kind of environment? It's really about adding on and not replacing. It's also not about cloning one right way of thinking. It's about, even in Paul and Dave's example, Aaron's example, is about designing the team so that different brains can complete the team, not compete. And it's a bit like a rugby team, props aren't halfbacks. The tension between the ball is between the moves and the people is what moves the ball. And it takes that kind of level of understanding of the different skills. And sometimes you need to, kind of really lean in. Dyslexia is not about the deficits. It is about that advantage. So I'm going to head to Dave. Dave, what does good leadership for all minds look like in practice?
So good leadership for me, for all minds, it's deliberate. So it's not accidental. And what's worked well for me is I really like different frameworks. And one that springs to mind that I've used quite a bit is Patrick Lencioni. He's got all sorts of models for everything, but he's got a working genius framework, which is really good for creating common languages and identifying everyone's different working styles. So I don't think, like the working genius is called out for neurodiversity or dyslexia, but ultimately that's what it's addressing. We all have different styles, we have different strengths, different preferences. So that for me works really well, and it helps, create good practice. Creating really clear roles. Another thing that we do that works well is use sort of rituals in your business or your team. So sometimes like round robins before beginning of meetings, or teams where everyone speaks before the senior person, or getting people to do a written reflection before the meeting, so that only the people who are really loud aren't the ones that are heard. And also things like, making it a ritual to explicitly challenge. So where questioning's the norm, not insubordination. So those sort of things I think help as well.
I think there's some great examples there, and it's, again, it's about not necessarily neurodiversity, but actually just thinking about how do you make it safe for people to contribute and to be involved. Michelle, you've had some, experience in your roles as well. What can you add in here?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with absolutely everything Dave has said, and I think those rituals and that environment is absolutely necessary. It kind of goes back to my previous point, I guess, is around the fact that understanding what we're all, and that's why what we're all good at and what we're not good at, and my squiggles, and one day I will do a TED talk on this. If we have a job description, which is a box, if we allow ourselves to understand what the optimum thing we're trying to achieve, whether it's a for-profit, not-for-profit, doesn't matter, like what we're trying to achieve as an organization, and not get hung up on this is my job description and that's somebody else's, but can almost mold into what our strengths are, then you're always going to fill far more for an organization than if you were to stick in a box. And sorry, Michael, because when I told you the story before, I had a lot more time, so I'm not describing it very well. But I think, just trying to say that allowing people to blend into what they're passionate about, what they're good at, and creating a culture where that's okay, And I've got, again, there are so many stories, like you were saying, Paul, like so many stories I could tell, especially working in the disability sector, where you can tell the story of how people have strengths that have never been explored, but if you let them go outside of that box, they can do so well. And it goes beyond neurodiversity. It's just how we should be as leaders, full stop.
And I think that's the takeaway, letting people step outside the box, the squiggly lines idea, the blending of where does one person's capabilities and behaviors, mix and work with someone else to be able to create something new and innovative or unlock that potential. That's great.
And Michael, if I could just jump in here, I've seen this in the work that we do, how a company has not noticed the strengths of someone because they couldn't put their thoughts down on paper easily, and they've missed all the strengths around them. So that organisation was missing out on their strengths. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Is that quite common, Chris? That kind of Yeah,
it is, because it's the person gets so frustrated because they're not working to their strengths, and the organisation is, has got that box that Michelle talks about, that it's very restrictive, and so the organisation isn't getting the best out of the employee either. So
and it's an easy, simple fix, right? Something that we can do today. Yeah,
agree.
Okay, look, that's brilliant. So I think that leads us well to the next question. How do we design roles so that different brains can complete and not compete? How do we think about how we describe roles and get people to work so that it kind of creates that lovely cohesive team? Aaron, I'm going to come to you.
For me, it's about being clear in what the objective is, what you're trying to achieve, whether it be as a team or a project or as a business with a long-term strategy, whilst also aligning it with the purpose. So then you get the right people culturally aligned. It's important to get that balance straight away, but equally having the right skills to be able to execute against that goal. So then by understanding what the goal is and having the right people, you can then assess the skills that you've got and versus the skills that you're going to need. But it also allows, by doing that openly, and allows you, again, to that comment I made earlier about being vulnerable, you can look at it and say, okay, this is the role I need to play to allow us to achieve this. This is the role that this person will play to achieve this as well. But this is the area where we need some skills or expertise, or this is a gap in what we've got at the moment. So then you can create a role around that complements the team, as opposed to, like you say earlier, about competing with the team. Because ultimately, what we're trying to do is collectively have agreed to achieve this objective. All the while, it has to be set around our values and the purpose and what this team represents. So for me, that can be. I think the first thing to do is work out where you're going, and then you come back and work out what you need.
Yeah, I think that's what I just took away, which is being clear on what does success look like, where are we going and why, and then being able to build the team, and that works well if you understand the strengths and weaknesses of the team, so you know what positions they need to play. Yeah, I love that. Paul, you've also had some great experience here. I know you've shared one of those stories. What else can you add here in terms of, what else can you add?
Yeah, so I'll answer it in two parts. First is about, designing the roles, but then I'll jump into that there's a pretty big impediment that you need to overcome regardless of how you design and how you implement things. And the way I look at it is, a good thing is to create explicit pattern roles. And by that I mean, one person can focus on spotting signals and risks, another one can focus on translating those signals into operational tasks, and a third on to delivery and quality. And they are actually quite different roles, and people, have different strengths depending on the way they think and how they fit in there. Labeling responsibilities by function, not seniority, e.g. risk spotter, opportunity framer, delivery lead. Delivery lead is a very common term that's, in business now, and I think it's a really good term, so that all of those skills are visible and valued. The other thing I like to really see is you build those sort of short handoffs with clear artifacts, a 2-line insight, a 1-slide visual, a 2-step action list, to move work between minds without duplication and overcomplication. And of course you've got formalization of things like pairing rituals, allocating the spotter and the implementer, so that the patterns can actually become inputs into workflows and not afterthoughts, if that all kind of makes sense. But as I think of all this, there is a pretty big impediment to all of this, and it actually comes back to the individual themselves. So you can create these frameworks, you can create these roles, but you're still you're dealing with individuals. And looking at time, I know I've got time just to quickly share this, Michael. It's always easier to use an example about yourself. So myself over the years, I've used various adaptive workarounds to ensure that my dyslexia didn't hinder my ability to work. If that was following people into receptions, as before electronic sign-in, you could do the ditto marks because you couldn't spell the name, or have someone's name written out on a piece of paper before, or get somebody else to, for those of you who remember what a checkbook was, pre-populate your checkbook, all of those kind of things. You had your workarounds, and I thought it was the workarounds there so they didn't hinder my ability to work, but that's actually not true. The real reason was to protect my own self-worth, under the assumption that others would think I was a stupid or dumb or an imposter or a fake. When they found out I actually failed school C English 3 times, and I struggled to read, and those sort of things. And constantly hiding it and having workarounds to protect myself is bloody exhausting. And it really just is quite draining. And my turning point became when I stopped concealing my dyslexia and openly acknowledged it when things didn't go as planned or was struggling to understand. And you know what? To my surprise, people didn't judge me. They didn't really actually care. They didn't think I was stupid or dumb. They didn't think I was fake. Although my kids still do use a term, they call me a dun-dun. That is meant to be slightly, tongue-in-cheek, putting Dad down, but Dad's quite a dun-dun at some stuff, but there's a lot of stuff he's really good at. So what I'm trying to say is you can put all this in place, but if we don't, admit to ourselves our own challenges and realize that no one's going to judge you because of them, it's going to be hard, to actually take advantage of what any organization is setting up for you. But I will say that does not mean you don't stop using your adaptive workarounds. You don't stop trying. It's not a reason or an excuse not to do something, at all. It's more of a contextual information for people to understand when it doesn't kind of go exactly as it kind of meant. Sorry, I went on a little bit there, but it was sort of bugging me that we talk about all of these great things, but there's a fundamental thing that needs to be addressed. You're not a dun-dun, you're not a dummy. You're not an imposter or you're faking anything just because you failed school C English 3 times. That's NCA 100 level for those who don't remember that system.
Thank you for sharing that, Paul. Aaron, you're raising your hand?
I just wanted to add on to that with Paul. As soon as I think when you sort of embrace your dyslexia or neurodiversity and the skills, and by doing that you have to acknowledge what you're good at, but you equally are acknowledging what you're not good at. So it allows other people to step forward and fill that void and support you. And there's nothing more empowering for them than to them to be able to support you and show their worth and what they can do to help you move forward. And I think that's been one of the sort of most gratifying things that came out of it, I suppose, in a sense, was watching other people step forward and support me in a way that I hadn't had it before, but they're voluntarily doing it in a way that it helps me and the business and them and the team and everyone that we're connected to. So all of a sudden you are a much better version of yourself, because you know that's with the right person, who has the same care and attention, but a different skill set and a different way of thinking that will actually deliver a significantly better outcome than you could have done anyway. So for me, once you acknowledge it and accept it, the team get around you and help you be the best version of yourself, whilst allowing them to be the best version of themselves. And then all of a sudden, then you really start picking up momentum. So I think everything Paul said, I completely agree with. And I think the power is when you accept it and you share it with your team, it allows them to step forward and support you.
Yeah, look, that's...
Oh, sorry, I'd love to jump in with a tip there. I think the language thing is it's a really powerful sort of thing we raise. And I think an example of how we can be more effective or more inclusive, including people, is cutting out jargon and things. So you'd be surprised how often, regardless of any neurodiversity, people within your group might not understand a certain specific, part of your business or jargon or language. So I think that if we use that common phrase, if you can't explain it to someone outside your industry, you probably don't understand it, or you're probably not talking about it clear enough to make a decision. So I think by using clearer language invites more people to the conversation, not just the people who speak that, your version of corporate fluently. So I think it enables more people to stop translating or feeling inadequate, like Paul was saying, and they start contributing more. So it's just maybe a little tip that we can all do more.
Yeah, that's nice. And I'm going to just share a quote from Dorinda. When we last caught up, she said, when you have the knowledge of knowing how your brain works, you have the freedom to delegate, and you can do that without shame. And I love that. I think that is a really nice kind of remembering, for everyone on the call to just, you've got to be able to lean into that. And there's some great stories there. So look, thank you for sharing. We're going to keep us moving. Now, there are no questions. So please, if you're hearing from anyone and you want to delve down, just please put some questions in there and we'll keep a track on those. We do have time at the end as well, but also good just to keep it going as we work through. Just to finish this piece here, I think there's a lot of talk about bias at the moment. We also talked a lot about sometimes you need to slow down to speed up. So right now in business, it's all about pace and decision making, which is important. But if the stories that were just shared by the panelist, there's a little bit of understanding here just to how you need to operate. So Dave, I'm going to come to you. How do you reduce the bias inside your organization and being able to speed up great outcomes and decision making without steamrolling over different people, especially when you think about bias?
Put me on the hop here a little bit. I think I'm just going to refer back to what I was talking a little bit before about the rituals. I think the creating safe spaces, like blending in personal and fun questions into team meetings and stand-ups and things, creates a more safe environment where people can open up for the hard stuff. So maybe starting with everyone gets 1 minute to talk about something that's on their mind, but no one else can interrupt or cross-talk. Those types of things can create where people or maybe other people would fill the vacuum. And it's reflective people a guaranteed slot.
You've talked a lot about that safety in sharing what you do at Indie. That obviously is very important, and you obviously do that very well. So yeah, safety to disagree. Okay, that's brilliant. Now, we talked a lot as a panel about, and you're beginning to hear this from everyone, culture, right? To the panelists, the culture is far more than just words. It's not a manifesto. It's this language and the rituals. And you've just heard some fantastic examples plain words invite voices and jargon pushes them out. There was a real theme that we kind of came with, so that we worked through. So let's get a little bit specific about some of the ways that you on the call listening, the podcast listening, can change how your team performs. So, Michelle, I'm going to come to you. From your experience, what is the role of culture, language, and rituals and behaviors in unlocking innovation especially for including neurodivergent thinkers?
And I just have to acknowledge what everyone has just said, because it's amazing, and this doesn't need to turn into a counselling session, but it's quite cathartic, the whole thing. Amazing. For me, it's about the right words, the right language, the right environment for what you're in. And if I'm sorry, I don't want to tell too many stories, but I'll tell a story that one day we had the Prime Minister that came through our factory, disability factory in Christchurch, and one of my storemen saw me talking to the Prime Minister and then said to me afterwards that I had always made him feel like that he was a clever person because of the way I'd spoken to him. So, I think, Aaron, you were saying earlier, or Paul as well, both of you, about how you've been made to feel in the past, as I have as well. And I think what I realize is the ability to change the language depending on the audience. So you've got to adapt your communication, whether it's verbal or written or diagrammatic or whatever, to the audience, and understanding that not everybody inputs in the same way as everybody else. So that was just for me a real strong example of a time where I hadn't realized that I was adapting my communication style for the audience.
That's brilliant. And I think that's all about different doesn't equal difficult, and kind of being really clear on that. Dave, you talk a lot about values. What's your experience here, especially within Indie?
I think we really try and focus on using our values as verbs, not nouns. So they need to be actions, not names. So using your values in a way, like especially around framing questions, so we have values of willing to learn and being specialists, so are we willing to learn here? Does this use our specialist skills? I think someone's framing it that way, the language works for all cognitive styles. So I think that kind of can engage different ways of thinking again.
Yeah. Yep.
Not sure if I completely answered it, but
no, I think that's good. And I'm actually Chris, I'm going to ask you here. You obviously have quite a lot, with Unlock Innovation, running these types of workshops for organizations. What do you see as the role of culture and language rituals here at this layer to be able to unlock, this idea of untapped potential, but specifically creating moments of innovation?
Yeah, and this is probably where I get technical in my head about this, is because what all those things do, working towards creating a safe space, is, setting up the relationship, and like ritual creates predictability. So someone's not going in there thinking, I've got to say something in front of people. What do I say? That if they know and what's coming up, they can relax. And also, when they know that people will listen and not, jump in over them, they say, oh, this is good. People are hearing me. So all those things together, all the stuff that, looking at the strengths, working out how to communicate with people, making the language, sort of consistent. So there's no jargon. You're creating that environment that makes the, dyslexic individual feel okay to be there. And when you get that, referring to Paul, that's when they're going to be more comfortable to say, hey, I am dyslexic, because they know that those around them I've got their back, and create an environment like Aaron talks about. So when you get all that connecting and working together, you're going to be accessing all those problem-solving strengths, the big picture thinking, which, is helpful with innovation.
I love that. Ritual creates, predictability, which I think is important here. Okay, that's good. That's great. So, this idea of rituals, I think we're going to stick here for a little bit. Dave, what rituals have you put in place that cost nothing, but have changed some of the outcomes for you in terms of building culture, but also growing your business?
I think I've kind of already covered the key things I was talking about. The blending the personal or fun stuff into meetings, letting people bring themselves, what they do on weekends, favorite foods. You can incorporate all sorts of things into meetings that create that make us more likely to open up for the hard stuff, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've sort of covered those, but I think the rituals, like Chris said, is quite good at redistributing the power from the people who are fastest to respond to the more thoughtful, from the loudest to the clearest. I think Chris articulated it really well, saying about the ritual creates a predictability. I like that. I'll use that in the future.
Yeah, that might be a quote of the day. Aaron, sorry, have you got anything, again, those kind of rituals? You've shared some of those when we caught up one-on-one, but did you want to share and add anything here?
I'm not sure I can add too much unless you want to prompt a memory from when we had that chat, because I was bouncing around in the back of a van at the time, so I don't really remember. But I just wanted to sort of carry on from what Chris and Dave was just saying a moment ago. I think one of the things around that predictability is your team learning what you're like and how you operate and what the best version of you looks like in different situations. So when you're in a meeting, if they know how you operate and function, and this takes time, people need to learn, your team work with you to understand how your brain works and how you move through things. Too fast or too slow, they can speed you up or slow you down. They can drag you out of a rabbit hole or let you run with something because they know you're going to land somewhere that's going to be quite useful, and they can watch innovation or creativity happening and be part of a solution that you're trying to find. So I think ritual being the regular meetings, the predictability is not just about the regular meetings or the whiteboard session or whatever it might be. It's just actually around behaviours, and then having the right attitude in that meeting and allowing each person to play their role. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or helps, but thought worth mentioning.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's great. I think what I'm also hearing here is a lot about the importance of trust, vulnerability, but also relationships. Michelle, when we talked, you're very passionate about, relationships and connections, so that there is safety that allows people to be able to contribute. So what's one relationship practice that you've used as a leader, you've seen, that really helps people contribute and manage change, which is often really hard, especially in the last 12 months where change has been pretty constant?
Yeah, so the one thing I've prided myself on is having a one-to-one with every person in the organisation. I'm not talking about my direct reports, I'm talking about every single person in the organisation, and doing that at least once, if not twice a year. And I use that as an opportunity to ask 3 questions. Everybody gets the same 3 questions, and it really gives me an ability to understand what is happening. And then probably every other year I will do it the other way around, where anyone can ask me 3 questions. So whatever questions they want to ask, which is almost more telling than the other way around. And for me, that just creates an environment where I get to know the people, I get to know what's important to them, I get to have a sense, and it creates an environment where I think, because I've had that one-to-one connection with everybody, they feel they can come to me as a leader regardless, and it opens up an environment of and it's been really hard, I have to say, for some of the middle managers, because they find it a bit difficult that I'm having this conversation with some of their direct reports. But once people get used to it and it becomes a safe environment in which people can talk about things, because I'll never make a decision and I need to, I'm so visual because of my dyslexia, I need to draw a diagram that every decision point comes back to the right place, like regardless of where the conversation happens. I never will make a decision ahead of a senior manager of mine or a middle manager of mine. It still gives, it creates a culture of understanding, and for me, that's been probably the biggest tool I've ever used in terms of relationships in my career.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think, and again, it's something that doesn't cost anything except time, but the upshot and the benefit and what you learn and the trust and credibility you build with the team is amazing. It's a question that's just come in, and it's perfect segue. I couldn't have set it up better myself. The question, and I'm going to put it to the group: what tools, software, or types of activities have you found most effective in supporting dyslexic thinkers and helping them work to their strength? So tools, activities to help dyslexic thinkers work to their strengths. Opening it up to the panel. Michelle, it's like a game show. Michelle, go.
Sorry, I'm doing too much talking. So one thing that I have done, which has been very practical, which I think is hopefully answering the question, is a lot of times in my background when I was not the CEO, I was more junior. A strategy was a piece of paper that was like massive, and it was like all words. And like many of you on the call, words are not my friends, maths is my friend, but visual is good. So one of the tools I've used is to get people in a room and to basically do a diagrammatic version of our strategy on something that can then be put on like a picture on every wall of every office. And that's what we talk to. So having that visual cue and talking to it. And do you know what's amazing in this is it's not just useful for dyslexics. It's a great way of talking to customers or donors or any sort of stakeholder, because you can, through the picture, you can tell a much better story. So sorry to do too much talking. I'm going to go.
No, I love that. That's great. That's great. Who else? Tools and tips. Anyone?
A quick one, Michael. The thing about tools, etc., and the ones we currently use and maybe should turn off. I never, heard of a job where you turn up to work, you read emails, you respond to emails, you go to a meeting, you come back, you create more emails, you respond to more emails, and then you go home again. So how about just introducing tools like Slack? And I know you can't ban emails, but putting a word limiter on them would be really good. As well, you can only write a couple of sentences and then that's done. That's just not for dyslexic people, but I love using tools like Slack, but I think it'd be just great for the whole workforce. Personal opinion.
Yeah, brilliant. Aaron, Chris, Dave, anything you want to add? No. Okay.
Well, yeah, I can. I have found ChatGPT a game changer for me, just because like the ordering and sequencing and getting my sentences the right way around. I just asked ChatGPT, fix my grammar, and out it comes just like that. And so it saved a lot of time, where I might have spent quite a lot of time typing up reports or emails, which is not my happy place. ChatGPT has just helped so much.
Yeah, that's great. I think there's been a little bit of talk about that by the panel. I think I would add, I use an app called Speak App on my phone after a meeting, or when I want to brief my co-founder, I just speak into that, and it uses AI. It doesn't add anything. It just creates structure and obviously fixes up any grammar and spelling. And that is great for briefing and just creating notes and even just simple email instructions. So it saves me typing. And again, it's $9 a month and it doesn't add anything to it, which is good. Okay. We have 4 minutes. There's no other questions. What we're going to do is go to quick fire round. Sorry, Aaron.
Oh, no, I was just going to say it's not a an app or a piece of software or anything like that. It's a bit more human in the sense of maybe just talking to the person with neurodiversity or dyslexia and asking how they want to be included in meetings. Sometimes it's better to be one-on-one. Sometimes it's in a team of 3. Sometimes it's have a whiteboard session or lots of paper on the table they can draw, lots of things to fiddle with. To allow, so making them feel comfortable so they can be the best version of themselves. But you can only do that through conversation, by understanding what makes them work, what makes them trigger, what triggers them. Asking them to speak in a group of 40 people they've never spoken in front of can be quite, threatening, because as much as you become comfortable in your position and around your people, with your people and the people you surround yourself with, when you go into a new environment, you're back to where you were when you're 10 years old again. You just suddenly have this imposter syndrome. You start to freak out. You start to overthink things. So by having trusted people around you that have got your back and create that space and ask those questions around how do I introduce you or the best version of you into this project, this workshop, I think just doing that is just really human, and it's a really nice way to acknowledge the skills that they offer and what they can bring to the team to make it better. But otherwise, everything else everyone else said.
Yeah, that's brilliant. One quick question for you, Aaron. Could Aaron talk about how branding connects a workforce? Do you know what? It's not actually a dyslexia question. Sorry, it's a great question. I think Aaron, and maybe it's that, Alistair, we provide you can reach out to Aaron on LinkedIn. I think Aaron can potentially talk a bit about that from a branding perspective. That's all good. Right. Quick fire questions. You've heard a lot from these guys. And so what we wanted to do was one question where they could just kind of provide one practical tip. The question is, what's the one thing we can do differently to make space for new ways of thinking, and why is that your one thing? Dave, you're up first.
Very one in, one out. That's definitely a good rule for life. Good luck with your partner around things in the house. But I think our organisations are really congested, not necessarily always under-resourced, and we keep adding initiatives, but really remove structures that benefit one type of thinker. So I would say that we can diversify thinking by removing barriers that only make one cognitive style successful. So stop adding, start subtracting. We might be surprised how much capacity there already is there.
Yeah, brilliant. Nice. Michelle.
Very simple. Don't walk past bad behaviours. Full stop. Just as a leader, lead into it, and don't, if you walk past it and you let it happen, that becomes a culture. So don't walk past bad behaviours, especially around different ways of thinking and being.
Yeah, nice. That's very powerful. Paul?
Yeah, we've got a shared problem we're trying to solve. It could be anything, big, small, medium. Focus on the why, not the how. Everyone starts with the how. Dyslexic, neurodiverse people will really excel in the why. Understanding the why are we trying to solve this problem in the first place, and that would be my one tip.
That's awesome. Love it. Start with the why. Aaron?
Just respect everyone's different views and the points or different styles of thinking, and I think you do that, you start moving pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, that's great. And Chris?
Well, I'd just, find out how someone prefers to communicate, because if you ask that question, then they know you're listening. And, and it's a real life way of showing that you understand diversity and thought.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And look, that's 1:00. That brings the panel to a close. Chris, you've got the pen. Why don't you just say a few words to just close the panel out?
Yeah, look, thank you to the panel, thank you to Michael, and thank you to Hannah. But thank you very much for turning up. I hope you've seen that whatever changes you're going to make to really incorporate different thinking doesn't have to be an overhaul of your whole system. It can be small stuff that doesn't cost, and there's some gold, the relationship, the rituals with what we've got here. And think about, as you go and leave us, what are you going to try? Something small, something simple to optimize that the talent, the dyslexic thinking, the diverse thinking, that talent that you've already got in your company. So have a think about that. And let's keep this conversation going. So, talk to us. talk to each other, because we really want to create those workspaces where people don't have to fit in to contribute, where thinking differently isn't a challenge we've got to manage, but it's an advantage that we can use. So thank you.
Brilliant. Wonderful words to close. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.